We finished chapter 9 today, and we're going to tell the story of a couple elections. The first is the election of 1796. This is our first real presidential election, and it features Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, who were both Democratic Republicans, and they were facing off against two Federalists, John Adams and Thomas Pinckney. Well, the voting went, and Adams had the most electoral votes, and Jefferson was second. So Adams, the Federalist, won. Jefferson, the Democratic Republican, came in second. Burr and Pinckney were behind them. Well, back then, they did not run with like as president and vice president. People just ran. So we had four people total running against each other out of those two parties. Well, according to the Constitution, the person with the second most electoral votes becomes vice president. So that meant John Adams was the new president, and Thomas Jefferson from the different party was the vice president. And that would never fly today. And it didn't fly real well then, but the parties weren't as against each other as they are now. So we had a president and vice president from different political parties, which was something that wasn't good. It just wasn't a good situation for anybody. Um, so John Adams was now president, and John Adams was about as opposite as George Washington as it gets. Washington was this tall man, this strong man, this great leader people looked up to and respected. He was calm. He didn't lose his cool. He had been a leader in the war. He had just done everything. Part of president of the Constitutional Convention. Adams was this short, pudgy little guy who had a temper, would yell a lot, fly off the handle a lot. If you remember, Adams was the guy that defended the people from the Boston Massacre. He defended the British troops, so he was just a lot different from Washington. Well, during his years as president, there was a conflict going on between France and England, and they were about to go to war. And well, they did go to war, but they were fighting, and they were trying to get the United States to help them. And France was like, "Hey, we helped you during the war," and England was like, "Hey, they have a revolution going on in France. They got a lot of bad stuff going on. You need to help us get this under control." Washington kept us out of it, but Adams just about got us involved. And a war was really the last thing we needed at that time because we're still trying to figure out ourselves. So a war was eventually avoided, but Adams lost a lot of support from the Federalist Party because he almost got us into the war. So now, here we are. We are stuck. Um, well, we're not stuck, but we have a president who people didn't really like, and things weren't going great. And we come up to another election 4 years later, the election of 1800, which is one of the most famous elections of all time. The two main candidates were Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, and they tied with 73 electoral votes. Okay, 73 electoral votes each, and they ran from the same party, so the party just split the votes. They were both Republican, and under the Constitution, if the Electoral College does not produce a winner, then the House of Representatives gets to decide. So the House of Representatives voted to break the tie, and they tied, and they tied again, and they tied again, and they tied over 30 times until finally they asked Alexander Hamilton, "You hate Thomas Jefferson. You hate Aaron Burr. Which would you choose if you had to choose?" And he said Jefferson to be his choice. And as you can see from the notes that I actually accidentally put up there about 30 seconds ago, they chose Jefferson. This made Burr very upset. Burr was his vice president until they eventually changed that to where you have your person run against you. And they changed some other election procedures with the 12th Amendment. But after all these ties, Jefferson won, and it was because Hamilton, who he did not like at all and did not like him at all, picked him. Why did Hamilton pick him? Aaron Burr he kept his plans to himself. He didn't tell a lot was going on. He just kind of kept his mouth shut and didn't really stand for much. And Jefferson, he stood for a lot. He was outgoing. He was this tall redhead, and tall redheads are always good. So he was outgoing though, and people liked that he told what he thought, and Burr didn't. And that's why Hamilton said that he'd have Jefferson, and people went with Hamilton, especially those from the Federalist Party, um, because they didn't really have a very good candidate. After the election ended, the Federalist Party declined totally, eventually fell out altogether when Alexander Hamilton was killed in a duel with Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr, who was our acting vice president at the time, shot and killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. And Hamilton wasn't going to be for president. He wasn't going to run for president or anything. He had some other problems that were going on in his life. But Burr and him disagreed so much. Burr was mad about the whole presidency thing. And Hamilton said some stuff about Burr in the papers. And Burr demanded an apology. Hamilton said no. Said, let's duel. So they dueled. And they went to Weehawken, New Jersey early one morning. They stand back to back, take 10 paces, turn around and fire, and you hope you live through it. If you don't live through, if you're shot and killed, then you lose. If you kill the other guy, you win. Or if but there's like a way to not shoot. If you don't want to shoot, you just have to put your gun up in the air. And that's showing you're brave enough. You're not a coward. You're not going to back out of the duel, but you're not going to shoot someone either. And what happened was Hamilton turned and put his pistol up towards the sky. It's because he wasn't going to shoot. He was not going to shoot Burr. Burr turned and saw the pistol go up and thought Hamilton was going to shoot, and boom, he shot him in the ribs. And a couple of days later, after a very slow and painful time, Hamilton died. And that was the end of the Federalist Party. That's also the end of our chapter 9 notes. So we will move on to chapter 10 and do 9 and 10 together. But our country now has its third president, and that's where we're stopping.